Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. I am Bryson Carver, as always, and we've got a great show for you guys today. Again, the quarterback drama in the NFL continues. It's been insane. I mean, look, Adam Schefter said about a month ago, or a few weeks ago, I should say, during the Super Bowl, he said, look, this is going to be the craziest quarterback offseason we've ever seen. So just buckle up and get ready for it. And boy, was he right. I'm going to explain a trade scenario involving Russell Wilson and my man, I'm wearing his hat, Dak Prescott, that actually makes a ton of sense. So I'll get into that in just a second. Also, Kevin Durant is out for All-Star Weekend. He will not play due to his nagging hamstring injury. It's kind of concerning when this keeps the story keeps going. I'll discuss that a little later in the show. Also, Kyrie Irving, He's a great basketball player, and he's a little loopy off the court, but he actually had a pretty good suggestion that he believes Kobe Bryant should be the new NBA logo. And he went into detail about it, and I'll explain what he said coming up a little later in the show. Also, J.J. Watt might get paid a lot of money, like more than we thought. I'll discuss that later as well. So let's start with Russell Wilson, and this story just keeps getting worse and worse for the Seahawks and for Pete Carroll. Because Russell Wilson is on the Dan Patrick Show on NBC Sports Radio, Fox Sports Radio, actually, I think is what it is. Dan Patrick, great radio host. Russell Wilson comes on his show, and he's detailing kind of his frustrations. He's pretty vocal about his frustrations with the Seahawks. He said, look, I'd like to have more input in the offense. The one thing I wasn't a huge fan of Russ doing is he took a few shots at his offensive line, and I talked about in this show, if there was one thing I could say the blame is a little on Russell Wilson, it's the fact that he's been sacked 394 times, which is way since he came into the league in 2012. He's been sacked 394 times, almost 400 times. That's way more than any other quarterback in the NFL by quite a mile. I think Matt Ryan is in second. He's like 50 or 60 sacks behind him. Now, part of that is Russell Wilson does like to hold the ball for a long time. That because the saying let Russ cook. Well, part of that is he's waiting, and we saw this happen to Andrew Luck, and this is what ultimately became the downfall of Andrew Luck. Stepping back, looking for somebody to throw to, and instead of just taking the cheap 5 yards, wanting to make the big play, big highlight play to DK Metcalf for Tyler Lockett instead of just hitting Chris Carson for a 5 to 10 yard gain. So some of that is on Russ, but everything else, Russ, he's done enough in this league. He's done more than enough in this league and for that franchise to have the right to have input in the offense. Patrick Mahomes has input on the Chiefs offense. Tom Brady has a lot of input on the Bucs offense. Okay? So this is something that's on Seattle. Okay? That's on Seattle for not giving Russ a voice in that scenario, in that aspect. But I thought about this. Russell Wilson listed 4 teams. I detailed it a little bit yesterday. He listed 4 teams that he would like to be traded to if the whole thing with the Seahawks doesn't work. And I was thinking about this. I'm 17 years old, of course, so I'm not married. I'm not to that stage in life yet. But let's just say I'm married to a woman, okay? And I say, I'm happy. I got a good marriage. I'm happy. But here's 4 other women I would like to marry. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I thought you were happy. So, Russell Wilson's agent coming out and say, well, Russ likes in Seattle, but here's 4 other teams that he would like to get traded to. Well, that doesn't make sense. So the 4 teams were the New Orleans Saints, the Chicago Bears, not the Oakland Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, New Orleans, if he gets traded there, I don't think it's going to happen because the Saints don't have the cap space. They could tinker with it. They probably have to. They might have to cut Michael Thomas might have to take a pay cut. Alvin Kamara may have to take a pay cut. Cam Jordan, one of their star players who's on a big contract, they might have to take a pay cut in order to be able to afford Russell Wilson in a trade. So if Russ, out of the 4 teams, if Russ goes to the Saints with that roster, you know what I said about the Saints all of last season? Respect to the great Drew Brees, but he was a shell of himself last year. I said, and maybe not a lot of people got on this, but, Max Kellerman had the Tom Brady cliff theory. Drew Brees fell off a cliff last year. He was bad. He was not a good quarterback last year. He couldn't push the ball down the field. He threw bad interceptions. Okay? You throw Russ into that offense with that defense behind him and Sean Payton, That's they were a Super Bowl. I didn't think they were a contender, but they certainly wouldn't have been stunned if they got into the Super Bowl last year, right? With that roster. You throw Russ in the mix, one could argue they're the Super Bowl favorites. They were the 2 seed last year with limited quarterback play. And so you had Russ. Oh, here we go. We're right back in the Super Bowl picture. So I think about that. If he goes to Chicago, I think they do compete with Green Bay, depending on what Chicago would have to give up. If they gave up just draft picks, then you've got Russell Wilson with a great defense behind him. If they bring back Allen Robinson, who's one of the most underrated receivers in the league, if Chicago brings back Allen Robinson, okay. Chicago's a good team. They're a playoff team. They were a playoff team twice with Mitchell Trubisky. So add Russell Wilson, of course they're a playoff team. Okay, you put them on the Vegas Raiders. Their offense would be great. Their defense is trash. It just is. It's terrible. And they got a lot of work to do. And I know they addressed some of that in the draft last year, but Vegas has a lot of work to do on the defensive side of the ball, and their special teams isn't amazing either. So then we get to Dallas, and that's the one that's, made the headlines like, oh, Russell Wilson to Dallas. And I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? This actually plays right into the Cowboys' hands, into the Seahawks' hands, and into Dak Prescott's hands. Now, I actually don't think it even plays into Russ's hands that much. I think Russ is getting a downgrade as far as roster, coaching. He goes from a non-meddling owner to the biggest meddling owner in sports. Well, at least in the NFL. I mean, you'd have, James Dolan with the Knicks. That's a whole nother story for another day. But you look at it and I say, okay, here's what you could do. Seattle can call Dallas and say, we're going to give you Russell Wilson, okay? But you got to give us Dak, likely on the franchise tag, Zeke, and you got to give us that first-round pick. Dallas is drafting 10th overall in this upcoming draft in a couple of months. That's where they're slated to draft. I think that works perfectly for both sides. Think about it. You know how much I love Dak Prescott. And I even compared Dak to Deshaun, and I love Deshaun too. I think Deshaun is just crazy. I think he's amazing. And I actually compared Dak and Deshaun situations. I was like, okay, the gap between those two is actually closer than we might think. But Dak is not Russell Wilson. He's not. Russ is on another level. I believe Russ is the second best quarterback in football behind Patrick Mahomes. I think he's that special. So Dallas gets a better I love Dak, but Dallas gets a better quarterback, cheaper. Even for next year, Dak on the franchise tag is going to make $37 million. Russ makes an average of $35 million on his contract. So better quarterback for cheaper, and they have him long term. Zeke produces nothing for Dallas at this point. So you have that. Seattle gets a top draft pick, which they haven't had in a long time. They get a franchise quarterback, at least for 1 year, and maybe it motivates Zeke to, take the offseason more seriously, take better care of his body, because Zeke the last few years has shown up to camp out of shape. He has. And so I look at that and I say, okay, for the Cowboys, better quarterback, cheaper. Now, does it make Dallas a Super Bowl contender? Absolutely not. I'm going to go on the record and say I don't think Patrick Mahomes could make Dallas a Super Bowl contender, as great as he is. I don't think Tom Brady could make Dallas a Super Bowl contender for numerous reasons. Number one, the defense is the worst in football. It's terrible. Number two, the offensive line is deteriorating. It's not good. Number three, coaching for at least the last decade and a half has been Dallas has not had a great coach since Bill Parcells. And Jerry ran him out of town just like he did with Jimmy Johnson in the 90s after winning back-to-back Super Bowls because Jerry didn't get enough credit. And the fourth, and most importantly, is Jerry Jones. Jerry, they say, oh, Jerry said himself, I'd pay anything to win a Super Bowl. Well, here's the thing. Jerry, you can win the Super Bowl. But heck, anybody in the NFL, especially with the brand of the Cowboys, anybody can win a Super Bowl. But Jerry wants to do it his way, right? He wants to do it his way and no other way. Jerry Jones, this is the same Jerry Jones that back in the 2014 NFL draft wanted to draft Johnny Manziel. And Stephen Jones, I have my issues with him, but to Stephen Jones' credit, he said, Jerry, he doesn't call him dad, he calls him Jerry. Stephen Jones said, Jerry, no, we're going to take Zach Martin, and Zach Martin ended up being one of the best right guards, if not still the best right guard in the NFL. And Johnny Manziel was out of the league in 2 years. So I think the Cowboys made the right decision there. I could be tripping, but I think they made the right decision. So Jerry wants to win, but he wants to do it with him getting the credit, with him getting the attention, and that's really it. So does Dallas get better trading Dak for Russ? 100% they do. Yes, they do. Now, Russ, I think, is getting as far as roster, he's getting a downgrade in Dallas. Better receiving. Now, I think Seattle's a good receiving core, but Russ gets an upgrade as far as the receiving core. Running game, downgrade. Like Tony Pollard, not as much as Seattle's running backs. Offensive line, Seattle's isn't great. Dallas is worse. Coaching, I know Russ and Pete Carroll have a beef, but Mike McCarthy with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre won one Super Bowl. With Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, Mike McCarthy won a single Super Bowl. Okay? And we see what Mike McCarthy has done without those two. It's not been good. I mean, if Mike McCarthy doesn't have a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, they look pretty bad, whether it's in Green Bay or whether it's in Dallas. So I sit back and I say, okay, I don't know why the Cowboys are on Russ's list, because as far as a roster, it's a downgrade. Now, he would be going to a much, much easier division. We all know how amazing the NFC West is with the Niners who went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, the Rams who went to the Super Bowl 3 years ago, the Cardinals who are on the come up. They get better and better with Kyler Murray. And, of course, the Seahawks have made the playoffs 8 of the last 9 years. So that is a brutal division. Then you look at the NFC East. Philly is a train wreck right now. I'd be shocked if they win more than 3-4 games next year. Washington's good, but they don't have a franchise quarterback. And they went 7-9 last year. The Giants, I like the Giants. I don't like Daniel Jones. I don't think he's the quarterback long-term for them. And Dallas refuses to sign their franchise quarterback, but they've overpaid everybody else, and the roster is void of talent outside of the receiver and quarterback position. So this is a situation where don't know why the Cowboys on Russ's list. But if the deal, if it goes through, and again, we're just speculating at this point, right? It's February. Free agency is about 2 weeks away. But if the deal goes through, Dak, Zeke, first-round pick for Russell Wilson, it works for the Cowboys. They get a better quarterback, cheaper. It works for the Seahawks. At least we get the first-round pick, and at least for 1 year, we get Dak Prescott. And for Dak, he can say, okay, I'm on the franchise tag. I'm in the toughest division in the NFL. If I can make the playoffs, win this division, maybe win a couple playoff games, then it's up to me, man. It's up to me, because then I could say, I went to the toughest division, new coach, new roster, new continent, or not continent, new part of the country. He goes way out there to Seattle, almost to Canada, and I was successful. And I had us in the Super Bowl contention just like Russ did. Now, Dak's not Russ, but he certainly is capable of doing that. And then in 2022, Dak can say, okay, I can go wherever I want, because people who need a quarterback will be lining up to sign me. Now, I would assume if he has success in Seattle, he'd probably stay in Seattle, but you get the idea. It would be totally up to Dak at that point, because a third franchise tag would cost the team over $50 million. That's not going to happen. A third franchise tag is not coming Dak Prescott's way. So I sit back and I say, this is not out of the question. It works for the Cowboys, it works for the Seahawks, and it works for Dak. I actually don't think it works for Russell Wilson at all, except for the fact that he gets away from Pete Carroll. And by the way, Russ's biggest issue with the Seahawks is that he doesn't get input. He doesn't have enough power, and he's earned the right to have that power. He ain't getting power in Dallas. He's not going to get a say with that guy, Jerry Jones, looking on. I can promise you, nobody in Dallas. If Tom Brady went to Dallas, he's not going to get the power. That's Jerry Jones' franchise, right? Because Jerry makes all the decisions, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. So this works for if it were to go through. It works for Dallas, it works for Seattle, and it works for Russell Wilson. Or excuse me, for Dak Prescott. I don't think it works for Russ. It's an opportunity for Pete Carroll, possibly. But that would be this could be so interesting. Now, I also something else to add is that the Houston Texans. I mentioned it yesterday. Deshaun Watson met with the new head coach David Culley and met with him. He said, "Look, I really don't want to be here. I'm not just messing around here for, contract leverage. I don't want to be here. Trade me. And so, like I said yesterday, the Texans got to have a come to Jesus moment and say, he don't want to be here. He don't want to be here. Just make him happy, see what we can get for him, and both sides move on. Because it's not going to end pretty if you just keep dragging this out. It's a bad look for the Texans. I think in the end, Deshaun looks good, but, depending on what team he goes to. But wouldn't the Texans give anything to be in the Seahawks? And I think the Texans are a dysfunctional organization. But wouldn't the Texans love to be in the Seahawks position? Like, Deshaun wants no part of Houston. Russ says, well, if you could fix the O-line and give me some input, that's all he's asking. Yeah, he's not complaining about money. He's making $35 million a year. He's not complaining about that. He's saying, fix the O-line, give me some input in the offense, I'm staying. If I'm Seattle, I'm not jumping to make calls to trade this guy. I'm trying to make him happy, keep him happy. It's a franchise quarterback. That's the best player by a mile. And Seattle's had some great players. That's the best player by a mile in the history of the Seahawks franchise. Like, instead of running to fix the problem, you let your ego get in the way and say, we'll show you. You go to the phones, and the report comes out that a third of the league has inquired about the Seahawks, and that their feeling is that they'll have to give up at least 3 first-round picks. Well, they wouldn't have known that if Seattle hadn't told them. Again, this is the third of the league, right? So this is, that's 10, 11 teams. So this is an interesting story that's going to continue to develop. And a Russ for Dak trade makes all the sense in the world for all sides, really, except Russell Wilson. So it's something to keep your eye on in the future, for sure. So let me move on to the NBA. Kevin Durant. It was announced today by Woj that Kevin Durant would not be available for All-Star Weekend next weekend because the hamstring has continued to bother him. And so it's reached the level where this is kind of concerning for the Brooklyn Nets, because, and it's starting to remind me as a Warriors fan, starting to remind me of the whole situation with KD's injury back in Golden State during that 2019 playoff run, which of course the Achilles is more serious than the hamstring as far as the long-term ramifications of having the worst injury possible. But at the same time, I always say, you don't screw with the Achilles. That's why the Lakers are sitting Anthony Davis. They're sitting Anthony Davis to say, we're not messing with this. And a step below that, you don't mess with the hamstring. The hamstring is so unpredictable. I mean, you could be out a month and you could be out 2 weeks. Like it's weird. It's one of the weirdest injuries in sports. And so Kevin Durant, who last played on February 13th, is still out. And by the way, credit to Brooklyn. I get it. They do have, James Harden and Kyrie Irving, but Brooklyn's been clicking right now. They've won 8 straight. They dominated Orlando last night, won by 30 plus. So Brooklyn's clicking right now. And so, insert KD back in there, and they're a scary, scary team. But I just think about it and I say, this is really concerning, I think, for the Nets. Because if you have Kevin Durant, your best player, now they don't have to rush him back, thankfully, because again, they're on a roll. They're a half game out of the first seed in the Eastern Conference behind Philadelphia. But I sit back and say, if KD, if this continues to bother him in the long run, I know Brooklyn's balling right now. They cannot win a championship without Kevin Durant. I'm here to tell you right now. They could, at best case scenario without KD, best case scenario, this might be stretching it, they could get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, if they were in the West, I don't think they could get to the Western Conference Finals, as loaded as the West is compared to the East. So, listen, this is kind of concerning that, when does the All-Star break? When does the All-Star break end? I think the season resumes on March 10th or 11th, because the second half of the schedule came out the other day. So KD would have been out for almost a month. So there we go. I like I said, the hamstring's weird. The hamstring is a weird injury because you can be out a week and a half, 2 weeks, and you can be out over a month. And it looks like that's going to be the case with Kevin Durant. Now, of course, he's not going to risk it during the All-Star game. I know you want to play, it's the All-Star game. It's the best players in the world coming together, but you just don't want to risk re-injuring it. But this is weird because it seems like every other day when the Nets are playing, it's like, oh, is Kevin Durant playing? There's a possibility, and he's out. And so now it just comes out, Woj tweets that, yeah, he's not playing until the second half of the season. He's out for the All-Star break. He's out for the next 2 weeks. So this is definitely an interesting story developing in Brooklyn. I don't want to make more out of it than it is. And thankfully for the Nets, they haven't missed a beat. Kyrie's been balling. James Harden's been playing amazing. He's been one of the 3 best players in basketball over the last couple of weeks. And so this is an interesting situation with the Nets. But in the long run, I'm not saying obviously this is going to keep KD out the rest of the season, but on KD's part, it is a little concerning because Kevin Durant is 32 years old. He'll be 33 in September. He's transitioning in that stage of his career where he's still great. KD is still great. He came back from the Achilles injury. It looks like he hasn't missed a beat. But it seems like he's becoming more brittle, more injury prone. So, and of course, he had the Achilles, the most serious injury he's ever had was the Achilles against Toronto in the finals a couple of years back. But with all these different things circulating with his hamstring, he had issue with his Achilles about a month and a half ago. And so what's the deal with that? So, if you're Brooklyn, do the same thing with Kevin Durant that the Lakers are doing with Anthony Davis. Don't mess with this hamstring. If you're the Lakers, don't mess with this Achilles. Now, the difference in the Nets and the Lakers, and I still think the Lakers are going to win the title and do it against the Nets, but the Lakers have lost, 4 straight, which I don't think is a big deal in the long run, but they have lost 4 straight. The Nets have won 8 straight. So credit to Brooklyn. I was dead wrong about the James Harden trade. As long as their defense is good enough, if it's good enough, if you're holding opponents to 105 in the playoffs with those 3 guys, once Kevin Durant's back, yeah, they should. I think their only test is Philadelphia because Philly's big. Joel Embiid is having an MVP caliber season. Ben Simmons has played great. Tobias Harris got hurt last night, but he's played well this season. Some even argued he was an all-star snub. And so, we got to see how this plays out. But Philadelphia is Brooklyn's only threat in the East, as long as they're healthy. So credit to the Nets and credit to Kevin Durant for not messing with this injury, for not, just brushing it off to the side. But they do need to be careful. Kevin Durant needs to be careful. And once he gets back, if he's fully healthy, right now the Nets already these last couple weeks, the Nets have been the best team in basketball, and I don't even think that's a question. They've been playing great basketball. Do I think they're going to win the title? If I'm being honest, no, I don't. I think once the Lakers get AD back, they'll be fine. But and get on a roll at the end of the season, go into the playoffs with momentum, and go from there in a loaded Western Conference. But if I had to rank my top 3 teams as far as who do I think can win the championship, I still got the Lakers at number 1. I got the Nets number 2, and believe it or not, I got the Utah Jazz number 3, probably followed by Philadelphia and then the Clippers. I don't think the Clippers are going to beat the Lakers. I don't think the Clippers can beat the Jazz. Because remember, last year, both the Clippers and the Jazz blew 3-1 leads to the Denver Nuggets. Utah at least didn't, the Clippers, to me, this is why the Clippers 3-1 choke last year was even worse than the Golden, and this hurts to say as a Warriors fan, was even worse than the 3-1 choke by Golden State to Cleveland. Because at least I get it was in the finals and no team had ever done it in the finals before, but, Golden State was in a close game in Game 5, but then Cleveland just kind of pulled away in the 4th quarter. But Golden State never had a big lead in that game. Game 6 was just a Cleveland rout. It was a wire-to-wire victory for the Cavs. And then Game 7, of course, was the heartbreaker. It was nip and tuck. But it's not like Golden State, I don't think they had a bigger lead than 7 in that game. So they were not just running away with it. You had the Clippers, who had I think it was a 15-point lead in Game 5, lost. A 19-point lead in Game 6, lost. And a 12-point lead in Game 7. So they had a double-digit lead in the final 3 games in that series and lost all 3. Utah didn't blow big leads in games to Denver. They just ultimately weren't able to close the deal. But Utah looks legit right now. I think they're better than the Clippers. I don't think they're better than Brooklyn, but I think they're the 3rd best team in basketball. I do. So as far as Kevin Durant's injury, as long as, it's worth missing All-Star Weekend. Trust me, it's not. It's for a great cause, of course, for, HBCUs, and I think it's going to frontline workers fighting this pandemic. But as far as on the standings, it doesn't mean anything. So, Kevin Durant sitting out is the smart thing to do if the hamstring injury is continuing to bother him. So that's what I think about this situation with the Nets. Now, Kyrie Irving was talking, and sometimes I cringe when I hear those words because Kyrie's a deep thinker. I think we figured that out by this point. Kyrie Irving is a deep thinker. Sometimes he thinks too much. Sometimes he doesn't think enough. I'm certainly not insinuating that the man is dumb. He's a very intelligent, intellectual individual. The 3 I's: intelligent, intellectual, individual. Say that 3 times fast. But Kyrie was talking the other day about Kobe Bryant, and Kyrie was close with the late great Kobe, and he was saying, Scott needs to. He even posted the picture. I'm looking at it right now of Kobe as the logo. And by the way, Jerry West, the current logo, that's really his nickname, to be honest. Jerry West, the logo of the NBA. Jerry said for a long time, I don't like being the logo. Jerry didn't even acknowledge that he was the logo for years, up until about probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. But it took him a while. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like being the logo of the NBA. And so I've heard people say Jordan wouldn't have a problem with that. And, with Kobe, Kyrie and other players, but Kyrie kind of went more in depth than other guys have about why Kobe should be should be the logo. And he posted on Instagram, he said, gotta happen. I don't care what anyone says. Black Kings built the league. And so he is correct about that. I believe the NBA is about 85% black. And you think about the greatest players ever in NBA history. In my top 10, the only white guy is Larry Bird. And the only other great player that comes to my mind immediately, like just right off the bat, is Jerry West. And so, you have two great players, but Kyrie's right. Black players built the league. And so in the case of Kobe Bryant, the Black Mamba, Killer Will, some argue the greatest scorer of all time. I think Kobe's the 4th greatest player ever. I got Jordan, LeBron, Kareem's the all-time leading scorer. So I got him at 3, and one of the most accomplished, if not the most accomplished player ever, and then followed by Kobe for what he did for the league and what he did in his career as one of the best scorers of all time and one of the greatest champions of all time. So I thought about this and I said, look, would Kobe have wanted to be the logo? I don't know. That I think that's at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. But the NBA's got to do something to honor Kobe. And I know last year they named the All-Star MVP. They renamed it the Kobe Bryant All-Star MVP Award. That's nice, but it's not, the Bill Russell Finals MVP. Like that's the Finals MVP. Like that's the second best award you could win in the NBA, individual award. Because the regular season MVP, that's 82 games. The Finals MVP is 4 to 7 games, but it's in the finals, right? It's the championship series, and so. I love the name of the Bill Russell Finals MVP trophy because Bill Russell won 11 rings. So I think that's aptly named. Could they name? I don't think they could name the MVP trophy after Kobe because he only won, and he should have won more, but he only won 1 MVP. So I look at it and I say, if you make him the logo, that's going to last forever maybe. So, and Jerry West, he didn't draft Kobe. He traded for Kobe Bryant back in the 1996 draft. And, of course the world was just, and I still hate to talk about it, but the world was just devastated when we lost Kobe. Ironically, I'm looking at the calendar right now, 13 months ago today. And few people outside, of course, Kobe's family, few people in the world of basketball were as devastated as Jerry West. I mean, Jerry was just, devastated. We were all devastated, but Jerry looked like he looked like he had lost a family member. He looked, just broken. And so if you ask Jerry West today, hey, you think Kobe Bryant should be the logo? I think Jerry West would tell you absolutely he should be the logo. I think he would tell you that. And so you can make it. Kyrie's picture he posted on Instagram was like a picture of Kobe. He's got the ball in his right hand. He's right in the midst of a dribble. I thought it'd be good to have Kobe, do his signature fadeaway, which he stole from Jordan, but he was still money with that fadeaway. But maybe you could do the same for MJ. But I think Kobe Bryant be the logo will be great for the league. Great, arguably the greatest scorer ever. Certainly top 3 or top 5. So again, I think Kyrie's the same guy that said the earth's flat. Same guy that said, like, what did he say? Steak isn't real meat, or Christmas isn't a holiday. He said some weird stuff. He's right on the money with this one. If there was a player to recreate the logo after, Jerry West was a great player. He's one of the greatest players in NBA history. Top 20, 25 player of all time. But I think we all recognize, those who aren't haters, recognize, worst case, absolute worst case scenario, Kobe's in the top 10. I think some people will have him as the GOAT. I don't think he is, but I got him in my top 4. He's my 4th greatest player ever. But wherever you got him, Kobe is absolutely in the top 10. That's not even a question. Jerry, great player, but he's in the top 20, maybe the top 25. And so I think Kyrie's got a valid argument. He even explained it into detail last night after the Nets win over the Magic. And he said, look at what he did for basketball. Look at what he did for the NBA. Absolutely, he should be the logo. I think he's 100% right on that. And I would be in full endorsement for that. Any other people say, oh, you just did it because he passed. Listen, sadly, Kobe wouldn't be here to see it. And how I feel about posthumous awards. It's like, well, yeah, but they're not there to accept it. So what was it? I understand honoring them, but if they're not there to accept it, what does it really mean? But I think this would be the greatest tribute the NBA could have, because I don't know if you could name the MVP trophy after him, because he only did one MVP. You can't. You're not going to rename the Bill Russell Finals MVP trophy because Bill Russell won 11 rings, right? He's got the All-Star MVP trophy, but yeah, it's great, but it's not. It's kind of like a tier 2 award in the NBA. Like, if you ask somebody today, would they rather be the Defensive Player of the Year or the All-Star Game MVP? They'd say, yeah, Defensive Player of the Year, man. And that doesn't mean you're just a defense-only guy. Giannis won it last year. Jordan won it during his career. And so, I think you do need to change it. If there were a guy to change it to, I think Kobe's the guy. So let's shift to the Boston Celtics, who today are 2 games under 500, and quite frankly, if we're being honest, have been playing pretty sorry basketball as of late. They've lost 3 straight. Of course, on Sunday on national TV on ABC against a sub-500 Pelicans team, blew a 24-point lead. Jason Tatum has not been playing great. Kemba Walker, I said it on Monday, has been a shell of himself this season. I didn't think he was amazing last year. He's dealt with injuries, but so far, the contract he's on, he has not lived up to what he was in Charlotte when he was balling with the Hornets. And so I step back and I say, what's next? What's next for the Celtics? And I detailed on Monday, look, the last time the Celtics were actively aggressive, because to me, there's no one way to build a championship team. There's not. You can do it this way, you can do it that way. I think more champions than not are active in free agency and draft well, right? Usually the drafting well part comes first, right? You draft a couple of young players, which the Celtics did. Jaylen Brown in 2016, Jason Tatum in 2017, and you see what they blossom into. They're both all-stars. Jason Tatum is actually going to replace Kevin Durant as an all-star starter. So you have that. So they drafted well. Kemba Walker's a good pickup in free agency, but it's not like you're getting a superstar. You're not getting a Kawhi Leonard. You're not getting an Anthony Davis or somebody of that, that caliber player. And so if you think about it, the last time the Celtics were aggressive in free agency and great in the draft, they drafted Paul Pierce. And then in free agency, they go after, it was a trade, but they got Kevin Garnett and they got Ray Allen. And of course, they drafted Rondo. So drafted 2 of their stars, Paul Pierce, superstar, Rondo, star, and then traded for 2 other superstars, most notably KG, the big tick, who, by the way, actually, this went like right over my head, but KG wrote a book. So that considering the trash talker and the vocal guy that KG is, that would be a very interesting read. But back to this. The last time the Celtics were aggressive, They won the championship. And we think of the Celtics, as we should, as one of the great franchises in the NBA, right? They're well run. Danny Ainge has done a good job. Brad Stevens, great coach, talented roster. And the last, three of the last 4 years, they've gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's pretty good. They lost to Cleveland twice, came very close the second time, and then they lost to Miami last year in the bubble in Orlando. But the Celtics in the last 35 years, one title. 35 years, and they've only got one ring, which was, of course, in 2008, which I just mentioned. They were aggressive in the draft and free agency, and you see what it got them. It got them the Larry O.B., as Steve Ballmer referred to with the Clippers. Larry O'Brien Trophy. That's what they all play for, right? So, I still think Boston's going to make the playoffs. I mean, they're in a skid right now. They're going to make the playoffs. They're one of the best 8 teams in the East. But can they win a playoff series? I know some of my guests on the show we're talking about, Boston could possibly beat Brooklyn. No disrespect. That would not even be a contest. I think Brooklyn would sweep Boston. And I'm not even being a prisoner of the moment. I think Brooklyn would literally sweep Boston. I don't trust some of those guys in the playoffs. I trust Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown to a certain extent. Kemba Walker was not good in the playoffs last year. Of course, they traded Gordon Hayward, who was a pretty interesting piece to that team. Brad Stevens is a great coach, but I don't know. Do you trust them late in these big playoff games when they don't have a bona fide superstar player? Jason Tatum's a star. He's not a superstar. I would take Donovan Mitchell today over Jason Tatum. I would absolutely take Nikola Jokic in Denver. The way he played in the bubble, I might take, depending on how the playoffs go, I might take Jamal Murray over Jason Tatum. That's still up for debate. I got to see how this playoff run goes. When they're not in the bubble, when it's just like a normal playoff format, they're traveling back and forth, city to city. So I don't know what to make of the Celtics at this point. They're certainly not a championship contender. I didn't buy into them as a contender from the beginning of the season, but I didn't think they'd be in a position where towards the All-Star break, if the season ended today, the Celtics would be out of the playoffs. I didn't see that coming. So they gotta have some. They gotta talk this out and say, like, what are we doing? What are we doing wrong? What do we got to fix? Because they're a talented team. Nobody's doubting that. I do think they need to get some size. Maybe go after an Andre Drummond in a trade, or if he's bought out by the Cavs, maybe go after Andre Drummond. Daniel Tice, Tristan Thompson, those guys aren't going to get it done. Of course, Tristan Thompson's a little undersized, but he is underwhelmed in Boston. Daniel Tice, nice player, but I don't think he's a starting center in the NBA. I don't. Andre Drummond's one of, if not the best rebounder in the league. So you get him. That's an upgrade at center. But it's just really interesting to me how that's all went down with Boston, is when they kind of play it safe, draft, don't ruffle any feathers with trades or free agency. You'll be good. You'll be talented if you draft right, which the Celtics absolutely have. But nobody's really going to take you seriously as a championship contender. Like we're all thinking about the Nets. As far as the East, we're thinking about the Nets. We're thinking about the Sixers. We're thinking about, I'm not thinking about, but some are thinking about Milwaukee. Some are even thinking about Indiana. Indiana, say what you want about them. They made the playoffs year after year after year as a 4 or 5 seed. I'll give them that. Ironically, the Celtics play the Pacers tonight on ESPN at 7:30 Eastern, so about an hour from now. So that'll be a really interesting game to watch. Indiana's a solid basketball team, and they're not healthy either. If they could get TJ Warren and Karis LeVert back, maybe they could make a run at somebody in the playoffs and give somebody trouble. But this whole situation with Boston, it's fixable. They've certainly got the cap space to pay guys, and they've got the assets to trade. And I've heard some Celtics fans say, "Well, Marcus Smart's out." If Marcus Smart is he's a good player. He's important to that team. But if Marcus Smart is that important to your franchise and to your team, you might have to start asking some different questions than what you're already asking. So Marcus Smart's a very good player, but he's not this impactful. Surely, if he is, then that's a problem. So, final topic of the day. A little shorter show today, but JJ Watt is on the market, and JJ's been putting out these weird tweets. He put one the other day. And I'm no biology whiz, but I did. I got to credit to my biology teacher. Huge shout out to her. She's the best. But she taught this to me. I actually think I did a paper on this or something a couple years back. It's a long story, but JJ Watt the other day tweeted, "Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell." That's actually true, by the way. I can confirm that. But why he tweeted it, I don't know. Maybe he just learned it. I don't know. Maybe he learned it biology. Maybe he did. I don't know. Why did JJ Watt tweet, "Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell"? I don't know. And, of course, people are speculating, what does that mean? Is that, Cleveland Browns fans thought it had something to do with them. The Buffalo fans thought it had something to do with them. I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to compute. What does the mitochondria have to do with the Buffalo Bills, the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers? I've said on this show, I think Green Bay's the best fit. Green Bay needs an extra pass rusher. Good guy on, good veteran player. He's wanting to go after a ring. But I read today that, first of all, teams are lining up to sign him, which, like I said, J.J. Watt, I think according to Pro Football Focus, was ranked the 17th best defensive lineman last year. That's pretty good. It's not prime J.J. Prime J.J. Watt, he was Aaron Donald before Aaron Donald. I mean, we see Aaron Donald's won 3 Defensive Player of the Year trophies, which I believe J.J. Watt has also done. But Aaron Donald, the dominant defensive force he is, that was J.J. Watt back in 2014-15. Like that's what he was doing. He was actually in the MVP conversation. He was so dominant as a defensive player. He's obviously not that anymore, but he's still very effective. But what I think is interesting is I've read multiple reports saying that teams are offering him $15, $16 million. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is making about that much with the Panthers. And of course, he missed last year or most of last year due to injury. But Christian McCaffrey, when he's healthy, is one of the 10 best players in football. Okay? That's not the case anymore with J.J. Watt. So, I mean, I know you compare running back to defensive lineman. I understand that's, it's hard to compare the two. But as far as impact, Christian McCaffrey makes way more impact with Carolina than J.J. Watt would wherever he goes. And that's not a shot at J.J. It's just Christian McCaffrey's a great player. Alvin Kamara makes around that salary. Okay, Alvin Kamara is way more important to the Saints than J.J. Watt is to wherever he goes. But I've heard Buffalo thrown around. Maybe it'd work. Cleveland, possibly. Although Myles Garrett, one of the 3 best pass rushers in football, he does need help. But as long as Olivier Vernon comes back, and he's been pretty good in Cleveland, I believe he had double-digit sacks last year. So Cleveland has 2 good pass rushers. They could just use a little bit more help on the interior. But I've heard the Steelers thrown around. I don't think JJ. It's not because he doesn't like him, of course, but I don't think JJ wants to play with TJ. Because TJ Watt is obviously a better player today than JJ Watt. A lot of people believe that TJ was snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. Aaron Donald ended up getting it. A lot of people believe that TJ should have gotten it. So but it goes to show you how good TJ is. And so I don't think JJ wants to go there, and TJ gets all the shine. I don't think it's about JJ Watt being selfish. It's just I have my own path. You have your own path. Maybe we cross ways in the Super Bowl. That's why I think Green Bay works. Green Bay could use an extra pass rusher. JJ Watt is from Wisconsin, so he's not from anywhere near the Green Bay area, I don't believe, but he is a Wisconsin kid. So in a sense, he would kind of be coming home. Great veteran player. I think Aaron Rodgers is unbelievable, but Aaron is not a leader. So is JJ Watt that guy? Absolutely. We see how great of a leader he was with the dysfunctional Texans. So I think Green Bay would be a great fit, but if Green Bay and other teams are lining up to paying him $15, $16 million, I'm not going there. I'm not going to that. I'm not saying paying the veterans minimum, of course not, $1 million, but I'm not going higher than $12 million. Now, if I have to get in a bidding war with somebody, okay, I guess that's got to happen. But if I met with JJ Watt, I mean, what are you going to say? Because if teams are offering him 15, 16 million, and I, as the general manager, offered him 12, well, JJ is going to choose them as he gives them more money, and I'm sure those are championship contending teams because that's where JJ Watt wants to go. He's made his money. He wants to go after a Super Bowl ring, and nobody can blame him for that. I wish players like Larry Fitzgerald would do the same. Cardinals are a good team, but they're not contending for a Super Bowl. next season. So I'd like to see Larry Fitzgerald go somewhere and possibly put himself in a position to go after a Super Bowl. We saw what Greg Olsen did the same thing last year. Greg Olsen retired after last season, but Carolina was not going to be contending for a little while. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go to Seattle, see what happens. Seattle was a contending team last year, and it didn't work out in the end. They lost to the Rams in the wild card game, but they were contenders. And Greg Olsen retired. So I'd like to see Larry Fitzgerald do that. I'd like to see J.J. Watt, who is doing that right now. I think Green Bay would be the best fit for him. I do. I think Pittsburgh would be a decent fit. I just don't know if he'd, feel comfortable. And he's human. It's understandable. I don't know if he'd feel that comfortable with kind of, TJ being the star of the defense. So that's maybe not something that would suit him that well. Buffalo, I guess, would kind of make sense. Cleveland, maybe a little. But I think Green Bay is the best fit. So with that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Be sure to catch Carving It Up Monday, as always, at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific, on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter. If you're listening to Carving It Up Podcast, you have listened on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcasts. So hope everybody has a great weekend. Please continue to stay safe. God bless you all. Peace out.